because I don't want them to eat away at the humanity of this child through sinning against them, and I don't want them eating away at their humanity themselves. I think if we choose one or the other, then we have fallen into a trap, a lie that says one life is more valuable than the other. Both of them are equally desirable to God to be redeemed and freed from the sin that's been committed. One has been committed against them, and one the person has committed. God wants to take that darkness out of both of them. And the moment I forget that, and I say that the one who's committing the sin is less important than the one who's being sinned against, then I have bought into a lie that poisons my heart because it causes me to look at life differently than God does. You guys can disagree with me, that's okay. What do y'all think about that?
I disagree wholeheartedly.
Why?
Because if some son of a bitch wants to hurt somebody else like that, then there's no reason why God should have to love them.
I agree, but
And that's my thought. And if there's a higher code above that, then I would disagree with that.
well,
Seriously.
So
That could be for the situation he put me in, the fact that I've got 3 daughters, and then as soon as you said something about that, I immediately go my kids.
Sure.
And there would be no thought of his soul.
Which is why God says, vengeance is mine. Because we'll end up with that kind of mindset that says, God damn you if you don't let me have my vengeance.
So does that put me in a bad situation for me knowing right now what I would do ahead of time? There would be no thing.
Right. I think
It would be all that.
Now, don't get me wrong. If somebody did something against my children, I'm not sure exactly how I'd handle that. I know what I've said in the past, and I think that, but if I'm not careful, that puts me in an antagonistic relationship with God. And if I love Him more than I love anything else, then I would say, I don't want to do anything that's going to put me in an antagonistic relationship with you, God. You are more important than anything temporal. I want to love you more than anything else in my life. And the moment I don't, the enemy is going to use that to leverage us away from Him.
Well, it says in the Bible that we are supposed to show grace and forgiveness just as God showed grace and forgiveness to us. And how can God forgive us if we don't forgive someone who sinned against us? Now, if you think about justice, if you wrong me, you broke man's law, and man's law is going to deal with you, God can still give you grace and forgiveness. If you wrong me, come against my kids while I'm sitting here, and I exact vengeance upon you, then I've taken your grace away. I've taken my command to forgive you away. I've taken all that away, and it almost seems to me like I'm actually taking the burden of your sin upon myself.
You are.
Because I've denied you forgiveness, my forgiveness. I've denied it to you.
Yeah, but on the other hand, you should have thought of that crap before you came against my team.
That's true. I'm not saying.
But think about this.
That's easier said than done.
This goes back to one of the first things I said. God doesn't want us to diminish justice down to our love. He wants to increase our love up to the capacity of our vengeance. So God wants to grow our character up to bear the weight of that, because that's how He lives. God does not overlook any sin, and He does not approve of any sin, and He despises when innocence is abused. He hates it. He despises it passionately. But at the same time, He doesn't have to diminish His character of love in order to live that out. He can hold both of those and be the person who can do both. And He wants us to grow into the kind of person that can do both.
I would argue too that He has raised up offices in our society to handle things like that. For instance, with a kid, being abused by someone, society enacting judgment, righteous judgment on that person is valuable to society.
Yes.
We do it, and we've even diminished that we actually have done less to further society because we have taken that action on our own.
And not only do they protect society, but they protect the individual, because it frees me from the burden of having to be the one that takes another life. So God, as a gift of grace, has given us offices who enforce the law and military who go out and do military things, because it protects society from having to bear the burden of that on their soul. Does that make sense? That's a gift of grace. But it doesn't mean that we're free from the responsibility. It just means that day to day we're free from the burden of living out that responsibility. I don't surrender it because God never surrenders it. It just means I don't have to walk around with that burden every single day of being a charcoal filter for evil in life.
And the ones that He has already established for that purpose, and meet out that way.
And God has, if we understand calling, God has designed and called men to do that well. And He's called and designed men with the moral and emotional capacity to be great lovers and great justice dispensers at the same time. The problem is we don't understand calling in our society anymore, in the sense, and so we don't have men who are recognize that call, and because the church has so demonized violence that men who do have that capacity are living less than it, and that they're not able to protect society because they feel guilty by doing it. Rather than free to do what God made them to do, they feel guilty to do what God designed them to do. So those who naturally run to gunfire versus the 99% who run from it. The guy who goes to it out of his nature is the one God's called to do it. He's made them to be that way. Does that make sense? And that's a gift of grace to society.
So what happens when you're that guy, the one who runs the gunfire, but you're not in that office, you're not the law enforcement, you're not the military anymore?
Well, thank God our constitutional founders describe something called a militia.
I'm talking about this out here on the street. We walk
Yeah.
out here tonight, and there's a commotion down the road.
Right.
I'm not the guy who goes the other direction. So I'm down there, the crap's happening, and I do what it is my nature to do, but I'm not in that office. That doesn't absolve me of my actions.
No, no.
Although the law might.
No,
but
the office only acknowledges that this person has a gifting to do that. It does not shrink everybody down to only doing that.
I'm not that guy that runs. I've got kids. I'm putting myself in his shoes right now. I'm not running from this situation. I don't know what I'm going to do, but I'm telling you I'm not running, and it's not going to be pretty for the other guy. I may not take his life. I'm going to make it freaking miserable for a very long time to come, painful. And that's just, I know where my heart is, and I'm not saying that that's the best place for it to be. I just know where it is. How do I?
What's it? Yeah.
Because for me, to sit back and let it happen is a violation of who God made me be.
Right. It would be a violation of who God is. God has called all of it, given all of us that responsibility to protect our families. But He has identified and elevated some to do it every day.
Yeah, that I do agree, yes.
So we're talking about two different things. If you're a covenant Christian with violent, bad intentions, and I put a stop to that, I've prevented the crime from happening. If you do something bad for a Christian, and that once you've done it, that's where justice and vengeance come into play. If I don't allow you to do it because I'm defending Christian, then we don't have a vengeance standpoint. Does that make sense? That doesn't even come
all
into
the way
play.
up until the point when the cops arrive on the scene, I'm good, right? So
No, well, I don't
I mean,
know
if
that
somebody
you
breaks
would-
into
I
your
don't
house,
know.
If he's coming, my kid, he's done something, the act has already happened.
Actually,
and that
here's
makes
the
you
question.
cops
Here's
do.
the question. Here's really the struggle.
Here's the thing, you shoot the guy twice and he's down on the ground, he's not a threat anymore, do you coup de ride him or do you wait for the police?
Oh, if he's at my house in that situation, that's easy. Pop, 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 we're done. I'm talking about if I find out this guy did something to my kid and I catch him
Right,
before
but see,
the
there-
cops
but
do.
again, our heart,
Y'all get me riled up. I'm not doing this.
but our heart has to be careful, because if God doesn't want us to put that third one in there, I don't have a right to flip God off and go, I'm gonna do what I wanna do.
Well, if I put him down because he was pointing a gun at my family, I'm gonna make sure he can't point it again.
I understand that, but how's that any different than somebody else saying, God, I'm gonna do what I wanna do regardless of what you intend?
Well, then I need to make that decision before I pull the trigger the first time.
Exactly, because in the end, regardless of what our violent actions are, we have to kneel before the Father at the end of the day and say, Father, I hope I lived out this life today the way you would have if you'd have been in my shoes. And I hope you're pleased with my efforts to model you. You're talking about vengeance, you're not talking about justice. Because you're saying, I'm going to satisfy me and put this third bullet into somebody because it makes me feel better. Not because it reflects God.
No. That I'm not. That's just a part of whatever that. No, the vengeance part for me is chasing down a guy that I know did something to my family.
Even putting the third bullet in somebody is if it's uncalled for.
You may have different points of where it's called for. How much is called for?
Well, because my goal is to stop my family from being harmed. If I've accomplished that, I don't have a right to go beyond it. If I do, it's merely because I'm satisfying my own desires, not because I'm accomplishing the goal of protecting my family.
Then I'll consider it no longer free of mind to stop and
Okay,
But that's why we're doing this. See, this is why this is important.
It is.
Because we need to prepare our hearts before that day. Because we need Lance's voice in our head, what he just said, to be there when we're getting ready to pull that
That's
third
over
shot.
what you just said.
You see what I'm saying? We need what he's taught, what God has taught us through what he's saying. We need that in our head so that we don't go too far. I mean, that's what we need, because I hear what you're saying, but I also know you. If you go too far, you will torture yourself every day.
because
I know you.
let's imagine this. Let's say I go too far, and I could easily see how I could do that in that moment, because I go to the gun fight. I don't run from it. That's just my nature. I wish it was different, but it's always been that way. And I picked a few fights because of the same thing, you know. I mean, so that motivation. I mean, I was at Walmart one time, and this dude came in, and he was probably 6'2", and he was stacked. I mean, it was late at night. I was doing loss prevention, and there was a little old man that was kind of a security guard, but he couldn't arrest nobody. He just walked around, and this dude was like, "Why are you watching me?" And he started picking on this guy, and like, boom, boom. So I walked by, and I said, "Man, why'd you call me a faggot?" And he's like, "Huh?" He's like, "Man, I heard you call me a faggot," and he was like, I didn't say nothing to you. I said, "No, I heard it." I was stepping in the middle of this, you know, drawing his attention to me so he'd leave this old man alone. So I was picking a fight with him, you know, like literally picking a fight with this dude because he was picking on this little old man. It just made me mad. And it's like, even if I get my tail beat, because this is a big dude. I mean, it was, you know, I was like, this is the right thing to do, because I'd rather me get hurt than that little old man get hurt. And so I understand that motivation. I understand that. I'm driven by that. I mean, I did loss prevention at Walmart for a year and a half, and I caught tons of people. I got jumped a couple of times by at least 3 guys that come at me with guns, guys that came at me with crowbars, and I was there a lot of times by myself at night, and there'd be a group of 7 or 8 guys come in, and one would steal, and I had to make a decision. There's 7 or 8 guys walking out, one stolen. Am I going to let that guy walk out, or am I going to go out in the middle of 7 or 8 guys and stop the guy that stole? And I said to myself, I'll never not go out. And every single time I went out in the middle of 7 or 8 guys, said, that dude stole, blah, blah, blah. You know, sometimes it didn't end very well for me. Most of the times it did. But my nature I could not live with myself if I didn't do what I felt was the right thing. I literally couldn't do it. But here's the other side of it. If I pull the trigger when I shouldn't, when I'm laying in bed at night and I say, Father, I love you. Tell me what you're displeased with me in my life. He's going to say, you murdered somebody. You dishonored me because you pulled the trigger for your own vengeance, not to protect your family. So if you think you can do that freely without God being displeased, you're wrong. Doesn't mean I can't pull the trigger to defend my family and end somebody's life. But if I displease my Heavenly Father by doing it, He's going to let me know. And then I've got to deal with the guilt, the horror of what I've done. Because I've now become the person I killed. I became an intended murderer. Does that make sense?
Crystal clear.
Because if our desire as Christians is to please the Father, I will not take one step beyond what He intends me to do. And if I say, God damn you, I don't care, I'm no different than the people I'm defending my family against. And so we have to be very careful to not let evil infiltrate our hearts and cause us to take God's nature that He gave to us as the DNA of heroes and become something different. Because our goal is, God, reorder this world. Make me the way you wanted me to be. And honestly, for you and I both, I struggle with this. I do. I understand where you're coming from. I have reconciled myself that whether it's with my children, whether it's with pornography, whether it's with my wife, whether it's with shooting someone, I don't want to be one step over the line past where the Father wants me to be. And if there's any place in my life where that's not true, my prayer is, God, show me. I don't want to dishonor you. And like I said before, I've got 2 dogs. One I can trust and one I can't. Yeah, he can vouch for it. If I open the door, I promise you, if you walked in my house and opened my door and my Dutch Shepherd saw you, you would get bit. No if, ain't, no buts about it. But I can't let that dog out with nobody because I can't trust him. I wish he was the kind of dog that I could say sit, and he would sit instead of biting you. And I could say chill, and he would chill, and you could pet him and you could enjoy him the way I enjoy him. Because he's a beautiful dog and I love enjoying him. I just can't trust him around anybody. Exactly how God looks at some of us. God says, I can trust you with your family, but I can't trust you with anybody else's. I can trust you with power, but I can't trust you with too much power because you're too passionate and you would do something that would dishonor me. And so He doesn't give us more authority because we can't handle the power He's given us. Because He's not in control of us, we're in control of us.
That brings me. So what should we do with people like you that we trust with ourselves and we don't trust our loved ones or our friends?
Well, if they,
Because we all have
yeah,
people in our lives.
if they operate outside the law, then we put them down. Okay, so and if they operate within the law, we go, hey, there's a war front right over there. And if you follow orders, you'll be all right. Okay, so, but again, my dog's designed, his DNA is to protect his family. His DNA, he doesn't literally have an option. I mean, that's his build. And I've had other dogs in the past, their DNA was to lick you. They could kill you by slobbering all over you. You know what I mean? And that was just their DNA. I shouldn't expect that happy lab to act like my Dutch Shepherd. It's unfair. And when I look around and I hear pacifists as Christians, it's unfair to me to expect them to do what I've been designed to do. God put me in their life to take that role up for me. Right? So I hear what you're saying, and I agree to a large part with the inclination. But we're not free to live out our inclinations. I was at Ole Miss today. There were a lot of hot chicks walking around. I had some inclinations. But I'm not free to live out those inclinations. It doesn't mean it's not natural. It doesn't mean it's not right. It would be stupid to say, that's not an attractive young girl with a very high, dress on. Right? My man nature sees that. I'm not free to be able to do what I'm inclined to do. So my nature as a person who's oriented toward justice, I'm not free to express that however I want to. I have to do it in a way that honors God. The same way I have to manage my sexual desires, I have to manage my justice desires.
When we examine things, we're 99% of the time operating outside of the law. Correct? I mean, if we don't allow justice to meet itself out.
Yeah,
then-
I would think it's fair to say that most times if we're doing vengeance, then it's gonna be outside the law.
So a similar situation threatened to rear its head in my house last week, and my daughter was questioning me about this, and I said, well, you know me, I would love nothing more than to drive to his house and, you know, show him my brawling skills. I'd love to do that, you know, and put him down the old-fashioned way. And she said, so if you go to prison for attempted murder, is that going to make you a better father to me?
Kind of slaps your ass in the face, don't it?
And I was like, you know what I mean? And I was like, wow, you know, my daughter's 13. So if you go to prison for that, is that going to make you a better father?
And this goes back to erotic love. Am I gonna do this because of how it makes me feel, or am I gonna do it because it's what's best for my family? Am I gonna do this to satisfy me, or am I gonna do this because it's good for you? And I think that's very important, that God tests our character and our nature and tries us so that we know who we are, and we have men around us who can help us evaluate who we are. And when we say the things that make us feel good, they can go, well, that's the dangerous thing for you to say, because that may give you some burdens to bear that are not good for your soul. Same thing if I talked about a woman that was inappropriate. If a person was a really good friend of mine, they would say, that's not good for you. Right? Instead of egging each other on. We'd say that's not good for you, because if you think about that too much, then you will do some things that are not going to honor your family. And I think that our desire for vengeance has to be managed in the same way. Our desire for justice, our desire for protection. God wants men who are strong and ruthless and can be trusted. He doesn't want us to be less ruthless, he just wants us to be more trusted. Because he's ruthless.
Speaks to what you said. It's trust. You really don't. He said that I may not be in that situation for us.
I just got a Chevy, it's in need of this repair right there. It's in need of some repair.
But, you know, I've had a situation myself, the same, not the same situation, like many situations. And both times, my two different daughters both said similar things to me that kept me in the house. And I thought and paused and thought about it for a second. You know what?
Well, it's struggling because I've always said that's what I'll do. That's what I'll do. And I got no problem.
I have
doing
too.
that.
I've said it 1,000 times. I told my daughter this weekend. She's 14, you know, and I'm like, hey, make sure you tell all of these boys that are friends of yours how scary I really am. You know,
Yeah.
what I'm not afraid to do.
And it was my daughter that the one person in the house that I thought would think differently or think similar to me was like, is that really what you want to do?
Well, that's another
But she does the
face of that, or
she realizes what the consequences are.
Yeah.
So that's good.
when your son knows the situation that your family's in, dealing with other family members right now, he knows how bad Daddy's health is right now because he's overriding the urge to go beat the living out of this little redhead. And I hear out of my sons exactly what I'm feeling, and I have to say, no, it's not what we're about, that's not who we are, that's not what we're gonna do.
Then
You're
you
not
have
sure.
answered all of your own questions tonight. Because
No,
you are the
that's because that little.
That doesn't matter. You struggle with it.
Done anything like you did yet.
Well, we probably need to wrap this up. I mean, I'd love to go all night because it's a very interesting topic. But in the end, we can't become what we despise. And if I tell my children the right way to live and I hold on to the wrong way, we reproduce who we are and not what we know. The basic leadership principle is you reproduce who you are and not what you know. And so I can tell my son, you should never give in to pornography. But if I do that in private, God's going to visit that on him as well, even if my son never knows, because I've never taken it out of the home. So I can tell my son the right way to live. God did not ask me to tell my son the right way to live. He asked me to show my son the right way to live. He asked me to be the right way to live. And so as Christians, I think for too long, we have said, as long as I say what's right, it doesn't matter if I am right. And I think we've got to be real careful with that. Because the leadership principle that is unarguable is we reproduce who we are and not what we know. And so we've got to be the right kind of person in order to produce the right kind of people. So let it go. Find a way. I don't know what it is. I don't know how to do it. Because I'm telling you some things I can't do. But what I do know is that this is true. And if your sons need to let it go, then you've got to find a way to let it go too. Because your job is to lead them, not point them. Same way for me. All of us. I'm talking, it's easy to pick out because you said it, but it's true for all of us. God's called us to lead, not point. And Christianity for too long has been pointing and not leading. All right, last thought. And I don't want to read it if I already read it. Have I read you guys the story about, I already told you about when I went to Africa and read you the story about David Livingstone? Good, because this is my favorite story. He was born in Blantyre, Scotland in 1813. And I encourage you to buy his biography and read it. It'll do you some good, as it does me. As a young man, he had a hero, a missionary by the name of Charles Goodslav. And he longed to be that kind of man of God. And he prayed as a young man, send me anywhere, only go with me. Place any burden on me, only sustain me. Sever any ties, but the ties that bind me to your service and to your heart. And through it all, he says, came this answer to his soul, behold, I am with you always, even to the end of the world. He looked at Africa one day and he said, the haunting specter, he said this to his wife, the haunting specter of the smoke of 1,000 villages and the morning sun is burning in my heart. So he took his wife and his family to Africa, but in a few days his child died, so he sent his wife Mary and the rest of his family back to Scotland. The next time he would see his dear wife was 5 years, 5 long years. He would not see his wife and his children. I was only gone for about 7 days in Africa, in the same part of the country, continent where he was, and it was hard. 5 years he was gone. He loved his dad. 2 days before David arrived home on a furlough, his dad was buried, and he wept like a little boy. Mary, his wife, asked him, honey, are you going to go again? He reminded her of the haunting specter of the smoke of 1,000 villages in the morning sun. She endorsed it, and her children endorsed it. She loved him dearly, and when he arrived, she had written several poems to express her love. They are heartwarming, and they are romantic, and they are tender, and they're magnificent. And yet, when she saw her husband at that time, his shoulder had been torn off by a lion. He was blind in one eye because he walked into a branch on a dark night. When he spoke at the University of England, they were going to make fun of this man, this poor old battered missionary. Yet when he spoke to those graduating students, they stood in stunned silence, with this half-eaten up man and this half-blind man standing with the authority of the voice of God. He packed his bags and went back to Africa. A few years went by and he asked his wife Mary to join him. The very day she set foot on the African soil, a crippling disease hit her. He canceled all his engagements and tried to nurse her back to health. He couldn't. Mary died in his arms, and he wept by her grave. And he said, my Jesus, my King, my life, my all, I again consecrate my life to thee. I shall place no value on anything I possess or anything I do, except in relation to your kingdom and to your work. He went to a little town called Ajiji. A native robbed him of his medicines that he desperately needed for pain and sickness. He fell flat on the ground and said, God, many years ago you said to me, lo, I'm with you always. And he says, but where are you now? When he opened his eyes, he lifted them up. He saw a figure standing there. He looked into the face of a white man, the first one he had seen in many years. Who was he? David didn't know him. But the man was an atheist who had been sent by the New York Herald to do a story on David Livingstone and to bring him some medicine. The atheist was a man by the name of Henry Stanley. And you may have heard the phrase, Dr. Livingstone, I presume. I will not tell you his story except to tell you that he lived with David Livingstone for a few weeks and magnificently got converted. Finally, the last chapter dawned in Livingston's life. He became sick, so sick they had to carry him on a stretcher as he preached. One night it was cold and damp and his heart was pounding more and more weakly. He asked one of his helpers to not disturb him anymore that night. He was just too tired. They took him to a little hut and put him on a bed, and they saw Livingston shuffle out of the bed, get down on his knees, and start praying. The natives stood at the door of the hut to keep him from the beasts. The rain was pounding in on him. Somebody came in an hour or two later and said, "I want to see the guana," that is, the master. The servant said, "No, he's too tired. Could you wait till the morning?" The man came again because he wanted to see him, and so they went in, and he was praying. David Livingston was praying, and so they came out. They went in a few hours later. He was still praying, so they went out. The native was wondering the last time they went in why he was laying there motionless on his knees. And he went up to him and he said, "Guana, guana." David Livingston had breathed his last, died exactly as he lived in the presence of his Lord. And I don't understand a lot of that kind of commitment. I mean, I can't imagine my health, my family, my children, my father, all those things, and losing them because I love God so much and I'm willing to go do what he's asked me to do. I don't understand that. But I do hope that God can rub a little bit of that commitment into my heart and my life so that I can begin to love the Father just a little bit like David Livingston did. I want to know God like that. I want to know the God he loved so that I can love him that way as well. Maybe I can think a little less about the hurt that I've suffered and a little more about the people who are around me. And this is not really a story about how great Livingston is. This is really a story of what God can make any of us who give our heart completely to God. And that's the real question, is how much of me does God really own?